Thank you so much, Ms. Giordano. I really appreciate your kind introduction. And I am thrilled to see all of you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune into our class. Um, I have a PowerPoint and some slides and things that I would like to share with you. And I hope that if you do have some questions as we go along, you could please feel free to put those in the chat. But let's go ahead and get started here. Well, I am just thrilled to talk with you about the clarinet and in particular about the sound and some of the most important elements of developing as a clarinetist and a musician. So I want to include this. The clarinet has been my spirit instrument since I think I was 3.5 in this picture when my grandmother gave me a little toy clarinet. And I fell in love with it and have remained in love with it over all these years. The things I would like to kind of share with you today, I've organized around several T words. So I'd like to first and foremost talk about tone on our instrument, and then the tools of our trade, our equipment, and technique, developing ways to get around the instrument so that we can accomplish whatever music is put in front of us and convey that in a wonderful, exciting way. And then I'd like to talk about the role of the tongue specifically for articulation and for also voicing the clarinet. And then I'll talk a little bit about tuning as well. So I actually may not be able to cover all of the information that I have prepared, but I do have a handout that Ms. Giordano will share with you towards the end of our time together so that you can have it to refer to, and it'll reference a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight. And so I hope you'll find that of help. So starting out with the concept of tone, the concept of sound. Really, sound is the most important thing. It's our voice on our instrument. And we want to make sure that whatever we do in the learning process, we are trying to grow and develop our concept of sound and musicality, and it's so related. All we do on our instrument in practicing and performing should all serve the goal of growing our unique voice on the instrument and also our musicality, our ability to share all music with others and to really communicate and touch the listener in some way. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about tone and musicality. So I'd like to talk about 4 main areas of tone on the clarinet. And I want to focus primarily on this first area, which is sound concept, because it's incredibly important to developing our voice. And one of the things that I think is especially important throughout our musical life, whether we've just begun playing the clarinet or we've played for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or how many ever years, is to listen to other fine musicians other than clarinetists. So listen to great musicians of all instruments, all genres. I've just listed a few here that came to mind quickly. It ranges from Maria Callas, who is a vocalist, Yo-Yo Ma, cellist, Yehuda, who's also a pianist, cellist, bassoonist, lots of folks. And we want to get our inspiration for phrasing and musicality and that communication that I was talking about, because ultimately that's what we're about, communicating sound and emotion, and really communicating things that maybe cannot be said in words. So listening to others is just incredibly helpful. And of course, there are hundreds of other people we could add to this list. But I really want you to encourage you to listen, listen liberally, and kind of be, just very dogmatic about listening as much as possible. So, in addition to listening to great musicians of all types, we of course want to listen to our own instrument and develop a good sound and a wonderful idea of a sound concept on our unique, wonderful instrument. So what is kind of what is a good sound on the clarinet? That's a great question. Could I get any folks to chime in? What do you think of when you think of a good sound on the clarinet? Feel free to come off mute and just shout it out or put it in the chat. Oh, I thought I heard someone. Don't be shy. When you think of a good sound, what do you think of?
I think clarity.
Clarity. Wonderful.
Lots of air.
Lots of air, support behind the sound. Absolutely.
Sounding more clear instead of having air blowing through and where you can hear it.
Yeah, focused and clear, having a core to the tone.
A deep, rich, dark sound.
Deep, rich, dark sound. Oh, this is great. Can we get a couple others?
Trying not to squeak.
Okay. Yeah. I like to think of squeaks as just maybe unintentional notes. I mean, they're high notes typically that maybe we didn't intend to play at that particular time, but yes, absolutely. Well, here are some ones that I thought of, which some have already been mentioned. And if you look at the list, some of them may seem a little bit conflicting, but I think it's a different facet of the same sort of sound. We want to be balanced. We want to have an intensity with that support. We want to have a singing, resonant, vibrant, rich, ringing, glowing. We want it to be refined and homogeneous throughout the whole register of the instrument, whether we're playing high or low, loud or soft. We want to maintain that same clarity. So it's incredibly helpful to listen to great clarinetists as well, so that we get an oral image in our head of some good sounds, because we will play that image that we have inside our head. And I've just listed a few players here, put some stars by some of my favorites, but there, of course, are many other wonderful people to listen to. But it is just so important to do that. I think I was with a clarinetist a while ago who said he likes to think of himself as an extreme listener. Just listen to the extreme, because you get so many ideas, so much inspiration. And it's when you're listening, you don't want to do it in a way that you're trying to copy the person, but you're looking for ideas, things that you could incorporate and make your own so that you can develop your own voice. So just incredibly important. I'd like to now go on and just talk a little bit about how we produce a sound on the clarinet, and talk about the embouchure. So the embouchure, of course, is the way our mouth and the complex inside of our mouth is structured. And the aim of a good embouchure is to control the airstream in order to produce those characteristics that we just talked about. And so over the years the clarinet has been around, right? The clarinet was born about 1700. So it's a relatively new instrument, as instruments go. But over this time period, clarinetists have discovered that there's kind of a certain embouchure that works best for this control. And here I've got a little photo, and it's kind of retro, right? It's an older photo, but it's one of the best that I have found. And it talks, you can see there's some, it says that the lower lip should be firmly up against the teeth, and the cheek's not puffed, and you get this nice pointed chin. And you can see on the left here, that her chin is coming down into a point because the lower lip is snug right up against the teeth and the gum structure. Also, the one on the right, you see, which isn't as favorable. The lip is kind of loose down here, and it's more rounded. So that's not going to produce as clear and as focused a sound as the embouchure on the left of the screen there. So there's some other things to think about as far as embouchure. Your lower lip, of course, rolls over your teeth, but just a tiny bit. The most common error is to put too much lip inside your mouth, and that deadens the sound a little too much. So we want just a little shelf to rest the reed on. And then our upper lip should be stretched down. Our teeth are going to be on the top of the mouthpiece. We want the corners of our mouth to kind of come in like a drawstring around the clarinet mouthpiece. Our tongue inside our mouth is also considered part of the embouchure, and I'd like to touch upon that a little bit more later. It helps to voice the sound and focus the air going into the clarinet. So maybe one of the best things, of course, that you can do to develop as a player and develop that sound and your musical voice is to play long tones, all right? Sometimes I like to call them savor tones, right? We're trying to listen carefully to the tone that we're producing and savor the sound, and do all we can to really enjoy playing. So if you have your clarinet out, I will be delighted if we could just play a few long tones together, okay? And just do your best to, we all know that the clarinet is the best instrument, right? Savor the sound when you're playing it. Just make it the best you can and enjoy it. Like to think that your sound would not exist if you weren't playing. And I just think, in our world today, there's so many difficult things, but music and beautiful sounds, wow, what a great thing to share. Okay, so let's just play, if you don't mind, my favorite scale, which is F. Okay, F for the clarinet. And one of the very basic warm-ups that I like to use to develop my sound is just to play an F scale beginning with my thumb, the thumb F, and then adding fingers down one at a time until I get to the low F in a scale. Okay, so if you would play with me, I would be thrilled. Okay, so I'll count off and we'll do whole notes. Okay, and so 4 counts on each pitch. All right, and when you need a breath, just go ahead and take it. Okay, 1, 2, ready, and. Thanks for playing along. So any sorts of long tones you can do. I like to sometimes pick a key or a scale and do a little improvisation. You can play any note you want in any order, and just enjoy it. Okay, so I'm going to play a little improvisation just with some long tones. It's not going to be fancy, but I would encourage you to do this too, just as an expression. There's, as long as you play the notes in the scale, there's nothing that you can do that's wrong. Okay, so I'm just going to take those same notes and play a little melody. All right, if you want to join me in your own way, you can while I'm playing this. I often have my students in a group setting. My clarinet ensemble will all do this at the same time, and it's kind of interesting what develops from what we're doing. But again, it's going to be really short, but join me, just whatever notes you want in the F scale. Okay, very simple, really great way to warm up, great way to play from your heart and develop your sound. Okay, so let's keep moving here and talk about some other things that we can do to work on our tone. So it's important for us to have the right amount of mouthpiece in our mouth when we're playing. Okay, if we have too little mouthpiece in our mouth, we're going to get a very kind of soft sound. It'll be kind of small and kind of tight. Hopefully you can get an idea of this over Zoom. I'll do my best. Okay, so. Okay, I'm actually blowing quite hard, but I don't have enough in there, and it sounds like a really small, thin sound. If I put too much mouthpiece in my mouth, it's going to get wild. The sound is going to be wild and uncontrollable. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little bit, successively, a little bit more mouthpiece in my mouth, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the difference. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a little bit and then go to a lot. Okay, so yes, I had a nice squeak there, a couple of them towards the end, right? Because I had too much mouthpiece in my mouth and it was just, wild and uncontrollable. Okay, so you have to find the sweet spot in there that it sounds the best. Okay, so a couple ways to do that. It depends on your mouthpiece, how much you have in your mouth. Okay. The mouthpiece facing is the part that the mouthpiece curves away from the reed. Okay. And different mouthpieces have different ways of curving out and different openings of the tip. Okay. And so what you want to do is just take a piece of paper, like in this picture. I'll take a little one here, and put it in between your mouthpiece and your reed, trying not to hurt your reed. Okay. And that place where if you're putting it in gently, that place where it stops right there is where you want your lower lip to be. That's the right amount of mouthpiece in the mouth for your particular mouthpiece. Okay. So if you could write a little mark on your reed there with a pencil if you want, just so you can see a visualize where that is. And you want to make sure that your lower lip is going on that spot. Now, if you are then holding the clarinet itself at the correct angle, then your teeth will naturally fall in the right place on the top of the mouthpiece, and you'll have the right angle going. Okay, so what is that angle? It should be, you should hold the clarinet at about a 30 to 45 degree angle to your body. Okay, I'm gonna kind of go like this so you can see a little bit more. Okay, so that it would be with the bell kind of being in between your knees when your head is straight. Okay, so if you follow those particular guidelines, you'll have the right amount in your mouth, and it again will add to your the vibrancy, the clarity, the focus, projection of your sound. Okay, so definitely check in on that. I mentioned a little bit about voicing on the instrument and how the position of your tongue inside your mouth is important to your tone. So it may be a little bit hard to see here, but we've got an illustration, and the tongue is this part that sort of is in a arched shape. Okay, and this is the shape we want for the clarinet, because you can see that there's just a small space in between the top of the tongue here and the roof of this player's mouth. And that's really good because it helps to speed up the air to have a little bit more narrow opening. So we want to think of the sides of our tongue gently resting on our upper molar teeth on the side. So I'm going to show you, excuse me for doing this, but this part of your tongue on the side should touch your upper molar teeth. Okay, like you're saying the syllable E. E, just gently. You don't have to force it there. Just allow it to be in that position. And good news, it's pretty much on all of the notes in the clarinet. You don't have to move it up or down. You want it to be in that spot, arched like that for every note. And that's really going to help you. So this is a quote here from one of my teachers. Simply put, the shape and the placement of your tongue is the driver of almost everything we struggle with on the instrument. The tongue is responsible for homogenizing the notes throughout the registers and dynamics, like we mentioned earlier, and reducing the edge, like the brightness in the upper register, in the altissimo register of the instrument. And it helps to eliminate the undertone. How many of us have been trying to play up in this range of the clarinet with the register key, and we get that undertone, like I don't know if you could hear that. I was playing two notes at once, the undertone and then the real tone. But that's what happens if our tongue isn't quite right. and all sorts of articulations and everything. So very important thing to pay attention to on the clarinet is voicing the sound. And I have to admit that I was well along into playing the instrument before this concept was introduced to me, and it was life-changing. That, yeah, the way my tongue is inside my mouth makes a big difference. Okay. Well, good. Let's go on and talk about some of our other T words. Okay, so tools. So our equipment. What are we using to help produce the sound? So I want to touch on 4 areas here: our instrument itself, and any aftermarket equipment upgrades. You know, there are specialized mouthpieces and ligatures and barrels and bells and all sorts of things. I just briefly want to touch upon that. Reeds, those are kind of like our vocal cords on the instrument, so incredibly important. And then some other little tips related to equipment here. So let's go through those. You want to try to stay with some trusted brands for your instrument if possible. Most of us have financial considerations, of course, when we're dealing with instruments, but it's really good to try to aim for the most rich and very tried and true instrument sound that you can. So these are some that I've just listed. Trusted brands: Buffet. I said consider the Green Line. I actually have today I'm playing on my Green Line clarinet. So this is a professional level clarinet that is made out of wood, but it's like wood dust or wood particles that's bound together with a polymer, right? So it has characteristics of wood, but it's not as fragile and as touchy. It's not going to crack as easily. So I have several clarinets, and it just so happens I often bring my Green Line to work because it's a little bit more durable. But that's a good thing to consider. Yamaha, Selmer, Bakun, those are all very trusted brands of instruments. A lot of players think that clarinets have a certain life, that you can play them maybe for 10 or 20 years, and then you need to consider getting a new instrument. It's unlike certain like violins that might appreciate over time. Clarinets generally don't do that, unfortunately. And the reason is because we blow moisture, spit, through the instruments, okay? And the bore, particularly if we're playing on a wooden instrument, it gets distorted over time just with normal playing. Some players do keep their instruments for longer than that, but it's just something you could tuck away in your mind. That's one of the reasons I like the Green Line, because it lasts a little bit longer, but that's just me. There's so many good options. A couple things you can do to maintain your clarinet that seem very straightforward, but that really help a lot. One is to use the right amount of cork grease, okay? So that you never have to force your parts of the instrument to go together. It's just nice and easy, but you don't use too much grease so that it gets all over the rest of the keys. But in order to maintain a good instrument, it's very important that your corks don't dry out. Use a good swab. I don't know, you may have seen I have a nice no with an exclamation point on this little swab, which is kind of a felt type. And they tend to get stuck in the clarinet. So I wouldn't recommend those. I would go with something else that is a microfiber or a silk swab, so that it'll last longer, be less likely to get stuck in your instrument. Dust the clarinet. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but if you look carefully in between the keys, you may notice some dust on your instrument. And if you just take a little paintbrush and just lightly dust it every week or so, it helps to keep the mechanism in good order. Okay, so it'll play at its best. And then, just like a car needs new tires every once in a while, your clarinet needs some new pads and things. And so it's good to think about having it overhauled, checked, professionally cleaned every 2 to 3 years. Okay. So having our equipment in top-notch shape is really going to help our sound and our ease of playing. All right. So these aftermarket upgrades that I mentioned, especially if you've been playing for more than a year or so, you want to consider getting an upgraded mouthpiece. That's the first thing. I like to think of the mouthpieces that sometimes come with instruments are it's like a spare tire, kind of, right? You can drive your car with a spare tire, but you only get so far, right? And they're typically not made to be used for a long period of time after you advance. It's better to try to get an upgraded mouthpiece. And if you have any questions about that, you can definitely be in touch with me, and I'm happy to offer a variety of suggestions. But I would definitely consider that, because that's really going to help your development to upgrade the mouthpiece. Sometimes it's also good to upgrade a ligature. The purpose of a ligature is to hold your reed on the mouthpiece securely and give you good resonance. And sometimes you'll find ligatures that tend to slide up just kind of on their own. You'll put them there and pretty soon they'll be, and so they might have a design that doesn't help to keep the reed really flat and secure. It doesn't allow the best reed vibration. So that may be something to consider if you're having difficulties with a stable sound. Sometimes you could get aftermarket barrels. I wouldn't worry about the upgrading your barrel or your bell unless you're really thinking of becoming, going into music as a profession, or are really serious about it. But I just want to say that they do exist, and sometimes they're good. I actually have an aftermarket barrel here. It's a buffet barrel, but it's been, the dimensions inside have been changed a little bit. So that helps with my sound. So here, talking about the aftermarket mouthpieces, this is a little chart from VanderCook, and it's probably very small and you probably can't see it. But this outlines all the different mouthpieces they have and what their characteristics are. And I'm not a spokesperson for VanderCook, but in my own playing and teaching, I've found that it's hard to go really wrong with any of their models, and they'll just produce different types of sound. And again, if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me or ask at the end here. We'll have a little time for questions. Okay, then our other really important tool is the reed. Okay, there are many good brands of reeds. I like to think of it as like a Coke and a Pepsi thing, right? Some people like Coke, some people like Pepsi, some people like this reed, some people like that reed. I'll just throw out two brands that tend to be good no matter what cut you're interested in. That would be Van Doren or D'Addario. So the D'Addario Reserve or the Reserve Evolution, they're all good options. And it is your vocal cords, and you do want to have a collection of good quality reeds to choose from, because again, that's really going to help your sound develop. What strength should you play? Well, it depends. It depends on the conditioning of your embouchure. You know, how long you've played, and how long you've played long tones, and condition those muscles into the ideal embouchure that we've talked about. It also depends on your mouthpiece facing. I have 3 or 4 different mouthpieces, and each one takes a little different reed, depending on that facing that we talked about. So it's hard to say that a particular strength is right for all players. You need to kind of experiment, and with hopefully the guidance of a teacher, you can find some options that work best for you. Always make sure you break your reed in. You want to make sure that new reeds, you just play them for a short period of time. I like to say 5 minutes, for 5 minutes a day for about a week. I like to get a whole box and play all of them in the box on the same day, and rotate them around and get to know them. They all have their unique personalities, and you'll gravitate more towards certain ones than others. And I like to save the ones that I really think have a especially good sound. I don't overplay them. It's tempting because it feels good and sounds good, but if you have some really good reeds that you find, use them sparingly so that they'll last a longer time. Have at least 4 reeds. That's the minimum. And more is better. How do you store them? Keep them in a reed guard or some sort of case that allows them to stay flat. That's the important thing with reeds. Sometimes I get questions about synthetic reeds, and actually I have a synthetic reed on today. I don't usually play it, but because I'm doing a lot of talking in between the playing, I thought it might be a good idea today, because it's going to respond, without drying out. Okay, so this is a Leger reed. I recommend them especially for marching band. If you're playing in a marching band, they can be a really good thing. I wouldn't tend to play on them exclusively, because it's good to have some cane reeds, but when I have a really bad day of reeds, sometimes I'll go to this because I know it's going to respond. It doesn't have always the vibrancy of a good cane reed, but I know it's gonna work. Okay. Then finally, as far as equipment here and tools, I just wanted to talk about a couple of other things, considerations. A lot of players have been using neck straps with the clarinet, and I think careful use of a neck strap can be helpful. It can take a little bit of weight off your thumb, especially if you're having tension and problems with your right hand. But you just want to make sure that your embouchure conditioning doesn't fall off and get a little bit worse because you're not firm enough here, because some of the neck strap is taking some of that support away from your embouchure. But definitely something to consider. When I go to professional conferences, I would say at least half of the professionals are playing with the neck straps most of the time. And if you have an adjustable thumb rest on your clarinet, make sure it's all the way up. Okay, that's the best position for your thumb. If it gets pulled down, it places more stress and strain on your thumb. So have that thumb rest all the way up, and it'll be in the most natural position. So you'll kind of ward off some of the issues that clarinetists often have with pain and stiffness in their right hand. And if you develop some real problems with that, there are some specialized thumb rests that you can look into. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out as a possibility. Okay, so I see that our time is kind of going by here, so I'm going to run through some of the other T words a little bit more quickly now, because I really wanted to focus especially on the sound, the tone, and what helps to produce the sound on our instrument. But let's talk a little bit about technique, okay? Because there are especially three things that we want to really think about in relation to developing a good, smooth, fast technique. Hand position, the motion of our fingers, and the fingering choices. We have a lot of choices for certain notes on the clarinet, and it's important to choose which fingerings we're going to use to optimize the smoothness and the flow. So with our hand position, you want to make sure that your fingers are angled on the clarinet. And excuse my poor artwork here, but I'm hoping that it gets the point across. You want your fingers to be angled at about a 45-degree angle to the clarinet, not perpendicular, not straight out, okay? And the reason for that is that 45-degree angle helps you to be able to reach all the keys as easily as possible, okay? So if your fingers are straight out, your index finger in both hands might have trouble working the keys that it's in charge of, okay? So want to go for that. Here's just another illustration of that with a real person's hand, but it shows you how you want to aim to have that angle to your fingers. Then as far as finger motion, how do we move our fingers on the clarinet? And what role do the different joints of our fingers play in developing our technique? First of all, the first joint in our finger here, the one that's closest to the nail, should be relatively straight and flat, okay? Because that allows our fingerprint to sink down into the holes, okay? If I bend that part of my finger too much, then I'm not able to cover the hole as well, and I will squeak. So really important that fleshy part be able to sink down into the hole. Then the middle joint of our finger, we want to make sure that's curved a little bit. Okay, that's bent so that we end up with this shape. It's kind of a U shape, or sometimes people call it a C shape. But the curve mainly comes from that middle joint bending in our finger. And then when we move our fingers, we want to move them from this joint up at the knuckle, okay? So that when we move our fingers up and down, they stay curved, okay? That'll give us, that'll help our speed, right? Because we don't straighten then bend, straight and bend. That's just an added step that we don't need. If we think of this as a hinge that moves our fingers, we're good, okay? And then we can move faster. All right, and just to kind of finish up this idea of our technique, there's some guiding principles for choosing your fingerings on the instrument. First of all, you want to choose the fingering that's the smoothest, okay? That makes the most sense and makes it easiest to go from note to note. When you are working with your pinky fingers, you always want to try to alternate sides, left and right or right and left, okay? So that you're not sliding on each side, okay? And because of the way the clarinet is designed, it is, you will encounter times when you have to slide. There's no way to avoid it, depending on the way the notes are lined up, the pitches that you have. If you have to slide, if there's no way around it, you want to slide downward in space, okay? You never want to slide your finger up, okay? But sliding it down is something you could do, just moving lightly and quickly if you have to. So always use chromatic fingerings when you're playing certain half-step passages. So the main chromatic fingerings are the low B. If I'm going from B flat to B natural, I definitely want to always use this. And the same thing if I have my register key on, it would be from F to F sharp. If I'm playing the thumb F and then I'm going to F sharp after that, I absolutely want to play the side F sharp where I'm adding my two bottom side keys. These chromatic fingerings are essential, and it would be considered wrong to play a chromatic scale like if I played F with my thumb and then went to this F sharp, okay? Because that's not smooth. That doesn't follow the smooth principle. So, and if you can localize motion to one hand, you want to do that, okay? So I could play a C over here on the right. I'm just moving fingers in one hand, going from upper F to a C. I want to do that instead of playing the C over here, if possible, because then now I have to coordinate two hands because I'm using my other pinky. Okay, well, I have some other things in the material, mainly talking a little bit more about tonguing and tuning on the instrument, but it looks like our time is about up, and I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to invite you to ask some questions. My students know I love questions. I love every single question. There's no such thing as a bad question, and probably other people will be thinking of the same thing, and you will help them out. Okay? Oh, and thank you so much for putting the hand out there in the chat. Okay? If for any reason you have trouble accessing this, you can just email me at B. Campbell, just like the soups, CAMPBELL, at VanderCook.edu, and I will be delighted to send it to you. Thank you so much. All right, there it is. Is the break real? Oh, I love that question. So the break, there's actually what we would consider two breaks on the clarinet. And the first one goes from B flat to B. Okay, we're going between the registers. And then the second, the high break, would be going from high C to up into the altissimo and C sharp. Yes, it is switching between the registers. And the best way, sometimes people talk about the dreaded break and how hard it is to go over the break and all that. I think it's best not to think of it as really a difficult thing. If you have a good hand position, it's 90% of being able to go well over the break. So if you follow those tips that we talked about tonight about moving your fingers and particularly your left hand, you want your left hand to play that A key with your first knuckle and the G sharp key with your second knuckle. If you keep in that position, it'll be a lot easier to go over the break. Okay, well, I see some other great questions here. Recommendations for warm-up songs. Wow, there's so many. I would just say pick something that you like. If there's a tune that you know, try to play it. Pick a key and just pick it out. There's lots of books of studies and etudes and things like that, but make up your own, like we did at the beginning when we just do your own improvisation. Or, maybe you're a big Disney fan. I love Coco. Okay, so play a song from Coco. Just anything. Folk songs are great. They have a lot of heart to them. I like to play folk songs too. So really use your imagination, and the sky's the limit. How can I make the sounds come out less airy, especially in the pianissimo? Okay, great question. So one of the things about the clarinet, and I hinted about this, it's very important to play with fast air on all the notes. Even when we're playing softly, we still want our air to be fast going through the instrument. One way I like to think about it is, if I'm playing softly and trying to avoid an airiness, it's like I'm playing in one of those little coffee straws, but I have a very laser focused airstream. Okay, let me see if I can show you. So if I'm playing softly, I don't know if you could hear that. I'm still really blowing fast, like I'm blowing out like I'm 80 years old, and I'm not 80 years old, but if I were, I would be blowing out candles on my birthday cake, okay? So keep the air fast. The other thing is make sure that these muscles around your lips are firm, okay? That's another reason. I can make a very airy sound if I don't firm up those muscles. Again, I don't know if you could hear that, but it was pretty airy just because I didn't have hard flesh here, okay? It was too flabby. Okay, so those are things that I would really make sure your reed is on straight too. If your reed is a little crooked, some people don't straighten up their reed at the bottom. That can make the sound airy too. So just, troubleshoot and see if any of those things help. Okay. And if not, let me know, because I could give you some other ideas. How can I play louder without squeaking or having bad intonation? Okay. Wow. Another great question. So I think just developing the conditioning of your embouchure muscles. So those long tones, the savor tones, enjoying them, and really developing the firmness, not biting, right? When I talk about firmness, I mean the muscles in your lips are like snug up against your teeth and your gums. Biting has to do with the jaw, and that's bringing your lips closer together. It's a different variable than having your lip muscles, your actual lip muscles firm. If you're biting here, that's going to give you a constricted sound. So you don't want to do that. But when you play louder, you have to make sure that your muscles are standing up to the extra air you're blowing, or the sound will get flabby and squeaky and just not be as focused. It's not that when you're playing loudly, you want to always tighten up those muscles. No, you want them to be firm all the time, but it'll be more noticeable when you're blowing a larger airstream, like you're blowing through one of those bubble tea straws instead of, a little coffee straw. Okay. And yeah, you'll go flat if this part of your embouchure isn't quite developed. So that's what I would focus on to help with that. A little bit about tuning, okay, and playing in tune. Okay, wow, great subjects. There's a little in the packet. I have some information about tuning and how you want to know the tendencies of your instrument, and then what you can do to help tune them. But I think it's good to first tune to an open G, right? And if that's sharp, you want to adjust here at your barrel. And then you can play a low C or an upper G. And if that is a little bit out of tune, you can pull out here. As clarinetists, we have to kind of take an average of the notes because the clarinet isn't perfectly tuned. I hope you're all sitting down for that bit of information, but yes, I'm sure you've noticed that. But the thing is that when you're pulling your instrument out, you have to take into consideration what range you're playing in most of the time, because certain notes, like if I'm playing a low F, that tends to be flat on most clarinets. If I'm playing a lot in the middle register, and I'm playing a C, that tends to be sharp on most clarinets because the distance between the 12ths isn't quite, it's all compromises on the instrument. So if I were playing a piece that were mainly in the low register, I wouldn't pull out as much as I might if I was playing in more upper notes on the instrument. So that information is in the packet, and I hope you'll find it helpful. Playing in tune, I think I like to play with a drone sometimes, so I put just a pitch on. I try to make it as pretty a sound as possible, because because I have some tuners that have better sounds, more beautiful sounds on them than others. But then I try to get the intervals and try to get the ring in the sound by doing that. So it's very important to know the tendencies of your individual notes, so that when you're in a group or when you're playing by yourself as a soloist and you hear something that isn't quite right in tune, then you know what your first instinct is to adjust it. And you can get so that after a while, you'll get used to almost adjusting things automatically just by what you're hearing and what you're used to as far as the tuning. So it's a process, okay? It's a process. Keep good-natured about it. I still work on tuning every day. It's a lifelong thing. Enjoy the process. It's so important. All right. Oh, recommendations for solos. Oh my goodness. And Mozart Concerto. Oh, wow. These are really great questions. Yeah, there's so many great solos. Maybe if you have that question, if you can just email me at like how long you've played and maybe what kind of music you like. Are you looking for something fast? Do you like a slower, more melodic kind of a piece? There's just so many good options that I'd be happy to give you some recommendations. Mozart concerto, listen to different recordings. It's so important. There must be 100 recordings of the Mozart concerto. Learn a little bit about the history of the piece, because it wasn't actually written for the B-flat clarinet. It was written for the basset clarinet. And if you know a little bit about the basset clarinet, and how it has an extended range, it helps you to interpret the piece. But I think listening is so very important on that one. Oh yeah, Robert Marcellus. You are absolutely right. It is such an amazing recording. I can't think of any better recordings. I also like Sabina Meyer's recording of the Mozart, but there's lots of great ones. Listen, listen, listen. Be an extreme listener. Absolutely. Okay, our more tips about embouchure. Wow. So I think the tips about your tongue and the voicing of your embouchure and playing long tones, I really can't give any better advice than that. And you're making sure you have a pointed chin and that your cheeks are right up. Take a video of yourself, okay, so you can watch your embouchure. Okay, I'd place the camera to the side so you can see your profile. Okay, and look and see, is it steady? Okay, because you don't want to see any movement in your embouchure when you're playing, except when you take a breath, right? And when you take a breath, your upper lip releases. Your top teeth still stay on the mouthpiece. Okay, so it's like this when you take a breath. You're releasing here, but your bottom lip should stay in the same playing position, and your top teeth should stay there too. Sorry, hope you could hear that. Okay, and throat tone B. Absolutely, I have advice for that. So the throat tone B is the thinnest note on the instrument because the sound comes out right here towards the top of the instrument. Okay, and the placement of the keys is an acoustic compromise. You must blow a lot of air through a B flat. Okay, a lot of people back off on that note because it's thin sounding, but think about this: since the sound is actually coming mainly out of these holes, it's coming out closer to your ear as a player than the notes down here, which come out these holes, or the couple that come out the bell. All right, so you think that you're playing that loudly, but people at a distance won't hear it as projecting. So blow a lot of air when you're playing the throat tone notes, the B flat, the A, and just that laser air going at the reed should help. If you could also put down some fingers in the right hand, which would give a little bit more resonance to the sound, and you could put down a variety of fingers, okay, depending on where you're going, and we could talk about that in a whole class, but those are the things I would try. All right, yes, shading the throat tones, yes, there you go. Okay, yeah, and you can cover the 3 holes, plus you can use this key, the low F key. A lot of people find that to be really good for resonance fingerings. Okay. Pushed in all the way and you're still flat. Maybe check on your mouthpiece, check on the size of your barrel. It should be 66 millimeters. If it's longer than that, it could cause you to be flat. Make sure your embouchure is real developed, because if the muscles aren't firm, that your pitch will also go down. Raise your tongue, absolutely. Tongue has a lot to do with the tuning. Single versus double lip. Yeah. Some players do use double lip, where that would be where they would put the upper lip over here. I think probably about 10% of clarinetists do that. And a lot of people think that it gives a more resonant sound. Sometimes I practice double lip just to get that freedom in the sound. It's painful. That's why more people don't do it. But I think there's, for some players, definitely a place for it. Okay. Tips of honors, bottom lip over your bottom teeth. How much should you put over your teeth? I like to think just half of the red part. Okay, so just a tiny little bit, just so that your teeth aren't touching on the reed. And it should be a thin shelf. Yeah. Okay. If you put too much, it'll be airy. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So many good questions. How can you be louder when you're marching? Yeah, have to blow a lot of air, and you have to come to the realization you're never going to be quite as loud as some instruments, right? Like the brass instruments and that sort of thing. We just don't have the capability of playing that loud. We have the capability of playing softer, though, which is very good. Yeah, I think if you haven't tried a synthetic reed, you could do that because it tends to be a little bit more projecting and a little bit louder. So you could try a Leger reed. I would get it in a quarter step lower than what you normally play. So say you play a 3, I would get it 2 3/4. They come in quarter sizes because they tend to be a little bit harder for the same number. Okay, wow. Yes, it's been a great pleasure. I've really had a wonderful time talking about my spirit instrument, and I would love to hear from you. And I hope our paths will cross again. Thanks for being such a great audience.